Josephine County is a beautiful place to live, and nature is easily accessible. Clean lakes, rivers, fishing, rafting. Farming, connection to animals, trees and forests. Places of quiet, caring people, and natural surroundings. But sometimes there's a price in living near the wild, untamed land. Wildfire.
Right on top of it.
In 2002, Josephine County experienced the very frightening Biscuit Fire. Suppression and rehabilitation costs have exceeded $150 million. The fire's perimeter grew to a final estimate of 499,570 acres.
I think what really set us up for a big problem this year was the fact that precipitation just didn't show up in the spring like it normally did, and stream flows dropped to where our conditions were dry on many of the springs and tributaries. Our groundwater supply was lower than what it has been in the past, where we even started out this year.
So with the red flag warnings, we pre-positioned firefighting folks in the local area. We brought in extra crews. We have equipment here that is normally not sitting and ready to go. And when the storm started on the 12th of July, the first storm came through southwestern Oregon and Northern California first, and there were several lightning strikes on the 12th of July. Numerous fires were reported from those lightning strikes. There's very little precipitation with that particular storm. 5 fires start within our Siskiyou National Forest at approximately the same time within the lightning storm. We had Biscuit Fire 1 and 2 down here, and Sourdough Camp over here. Those 3 fires grew together early on and were the fire that kept the south corner moving. At the same time, we had the Carter fire in this general area. Carter was in the wilderness area. We requested smoke jumpers early on and were told that there were no smoke jumpers available. It would be between 48 and 72 hours before we could count on having smoke jumpers. We had the Taylor fire over in this area, and we had Florence fire in this area. We successfully hiked crews into Taylor fire and the Carter fire, and were able to contain those fires and move our crews out to focus on the Florence fire and what became the Sour Biscuit fire down here. This is a fire progression map. It shows the position of the fires on any given day based on our mapping. The date here, 7/17, indicates this was on July 17th, the 18th, the 19th, and you can see that the fire is progressing outward. The Florence fire started in a lightning storm on the 13th of July. The first day we mapped it on the progression map was on the 15th of July, denoted by the red area here. And each day thereafter, the fire perimeter was mapped so that the progression shows as it was growing out and downward, which is typical of our east wind patterns.
When the fire started on the 13th, we got a lightning bust, and I got a call Sunday the 14th to fly reconnaissance and map the fires and find out if there was any other fires out here. And I spotted the Florence fire. Named it the Florence Fire because it was right adjacent to Florence Creek. It runs right down into the Illinois River. See, here's Florence Creek in section 28, and that's where it started. It was about 5 to 10 acres right there.
There was a trail access to the bottom of the fire in the vicinity that came in, the Florence Way Trail, and up on the ridgetop itself on the boundary of the wilderness was the Bald Mountain Road. And at that point in time, due to the location of the fire being very low down in the drainage, a good mile and change below the ridgetop, down below, I made the decision to send the crew in from the bottom on the Florence Way Trail instead of locating them up there on the ridge top itself. Part of the reason for my decision to do that was just the safety aspects of walking crews downhill towards that fire and that terrain, and the fact that there was very poor safety zone locations up on the ridge top or anywhere immediately in the vicinity as you came down on that fire.
It makes it kind of impossible to get people into, eh?
Yeah, in fact, they tried to get folks in there. They hiked a crew in the day after I found it, and I flew over the crew trying to help them find a safety zone or a safe way to go in to engage in firefighting, and I told them to disengage because there was just absolutely no way.
There was no anchor point.
There was no anchor point, and there was no way to place a lookout. And there was no escape routes and no safety zones, and we've got to have...
As Florence continued to grow, we had some very intense fire behavior the weekend of July 28th through the 30th, when the fire blew out of the area and in 2 days grew by 140,000 acres. At the same time, the Biscuit Fire down here had similar intense fire behavior and grew by several thousands of acres down here on the 28th and on the 29th and 30th down here again. It was our strategy to not place crews at risk between these two massive fires, but to work to grow them together and make a safer situation for our firefighting efforts.
Knowing that you're going to have a severe fire season and planning for it is one thing, but when you have the real world of a biscuit fire in your backyard, 33 years of fire experience, I have never seen any fire as intense as the Biscuit Fire. There was a day, the day that it burned Oak Flat and began to move towards Illinois Valley, that we had what we call plume-dominated events. That's a large column of smoke. I'm sure all of you folks have seen it, that rises to 35, 40,000 feet, looks like a mushroom cloud. That, when the fire gets that intense and develops those type of columns, the terrain and the weather is no longer driving the fire. The column itself is driving the fire. It can burn against the wind, it can burn down slope. It's not an unusual event to have a plume-dominated fire, but it is unusual in that on the Biscuit Fire in one day we had 7 plume-dominated events. All 7 of those columns collapsed, and when a plume collapses, basically it sucks material up into it, wood, leaves, limbs, and draws it up to about 30,000 feet, and as that material cools off, the column becomes too heavy to support the weight, and the column collapses. What that does is 35,000 feet of air all of a sudden falls and goes out in a 360-degree pattern around the base of that column and spreads fire everywhere. Again, not unusual to have one of those on a large fire. We had 7 in one day, all 7 rebuilt a second time in one day. Phenomenal. I have never seen fire behavior of that type in 33 years.
Some of you might have known yesterday.
The Josephine County Commissioners declared a state of emergency.
Because of the wildfire situation in the Illinois Valley. We also, Josephine County, the governor did come down and visit with the board, and last night
Local radio and television stations kept the public informed.
We'd like to remind you, broadcasting the town meeting live. We're going to have officials of the Forest Service, BLM, and other agencies there tonight, and they will spend time with you, the time required to make sure that you know exactly what is going on in the fire right now.
We're listening to the first broadcast community meeting at the Illinois Valley High School, and that whole time that we were viewing the fire, I didn't feel any fear at all. But when they broadcast that the fire could be in the valley floor the next day, then that's when the fear came. I was frightened. It brought it into reality to me.
It never crossed my mind that there was a possibility that we could lose the entire Illinois Valley. And I'm not sure if folks realize how close we came in 2002 to losing the valley. I thought at one time that we would be in the Illinois Valley fighting this fire house to house, home to home, saving lives. I thought this fire would cross the Rogue River, go north, and I thought we'd be standing on the beaches. That's the way the intensity of this fire was.
The Conflagration Act through the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office, and what that does is that brings additional structural resources down to assist us to protect the homes that were threatened. What we did locally then is 2 of our staff folks ended up to be personal liaisons to them, and we're able to show them where the neighborhoods were, where any specific sites that were in danger. They could lead them there, and they could assist the crews that were unfamiliar with our district.
As we were doing this, we were going to everybody's homes and residences and removing the brush and studying the buildings, so where the water sites were, what's the best access, so that when the time came, we wouldn't have to be caught off guard. We were planning ahead, so that should the fire come in a hurry, we didn't have to think about what we needed to do. We were just able to go and do it.
I was given some dozers, and I put in the last line of defense dozer line from Fort Hay Ranch to $8 Road.
County officials activated the Emergency Operations Center, and it primarily functioned as an information clearinghouse.
Hi, I'm Sarah Nicholson, the Josephine County Emergency Manager and Search and Rescue Coordinator. Welcome to the Josephine County Emergency Operations Center. We're located in the basement of the Sheriff's Office in the Josephine County Courthouse. I don't use any of that.
Well, thanks so much for helping us answer phones down here.
Well, you're welcome, Carrie.
Let me give you a brief tour of kind of what we've got going here.
We certainly don't have in our office enough people available to answer phones. Say that's just one, and that was a big operation in our EOC center is just answering phones from the phone calls from the public, and the county commissioners put out a memo to all county departments that we needed help. We needed help answering phones, and the response was overwhelming. I mean, we had people like even the county clerk, our elected county clerk, signed up to take I think an 8 to 12 p.m. slot answering phones. So it was really, it felt really good to me that the response we received from county departments, from the general public. I really felt good that everybody really came together, did just a bang-up job, jumped in and pitched in wherever they could to help out.
I think the sheriff said it best when when you could see the response from all of the citizens of Josephine County. I was amazed at how they came together. That. I mean, stranger helping stranger, where they may not wave at each other driving down the road, but because of the circumstance, and so they was giving shelter and food and lodging for animals, donating time, money. It was good.
Josephine County Public Health Department worked to ensure that health and safety would not be compromised.
And we under public health, we also have environmental health and sanitarians who inspect restaurants and other types of facilities. And so we had them go into the fire camps, and there were 2 fire camps. So they went in and inspected their food service to be sure that everything was safe and as it should be within a camp. They also went to the Red Cross shelter and inspected the kitchen, and the Red Cross also sent in a kitchen called a Baptist kitchen, and it had the capacity to feed thousands of people.
It worked very well working with the Department of Environmental Quality in relationship to Grants Pass air and the surrounding area because of the inversion layer that we have. And we were able to get information out very fast to the schools in terms of all their sports programs and how often kids should be outside and how they should exert themselves.
County Public Works, in conjunction with other agencies, determined the escape routes for possible evacuation.
They cooperated with state and federal agencies on road closures in the Illinois Valley during the fire event, provided signs and cones and barricades for traffic control and assisted in that traffic control. Another large area which became a factor in late July and early August of this event in 2002 was the potential evacuation of the entire Illinois Valley. There was 15,000 plus people planned for if the fire continued to spread throughout the valley, for a large-scale evacuation north out of the valley on the Redwood Highway.
Josephine County forestry personnel were drafted and became firefighters.
fire. And we did get a call from the Merlin Interagency Fire Team to respond to the Biscuit a few days after it had started. And we shipped equipment and personnel up to the fire to provide initial attack.
We're asked to open some roads up that were inaccessible to some of the fire vehicles, the hand crews and such as that. Was also asked to put some fire lines in on steep ground where it was easier to go with the cat than put a hand crew in there. I also was involved in putting in a pretty large safety zone for the firefighters to fall back on if they needed to.
The County Planning Department assisted the fire bosses by mapping the homes of the Illinois Valley.
The Forest Service primarily is a wildlands protection agency, but the local fire departments, because of the governor's declaration, sent 300 fire engines out here from 34 different structural fire protections agencies throughout the state of Oregon. They needed to know where the houses were, what the conditions of the houses were, so we supported the teams in doing over 900 assessments of various structures, help create the intake form, enter in the data into the computer, and then do the mapping.
They had a list of criteria that they would go out. They were actually sending crews out 24 hours a day during the really hot time of the fire, and they were looking at different items that would make a home more or less defensible. Were access. What sort of access was there available not only to the main road, but also down a driveway? Was the driveway wide enough for an engine to turn around once it got down there? Was it overgrown? So in an instance where a home had higher defensibility, it got a green rating. Something moderate, something that may have a few problems with it, would get a yellow or an orange dot. And then something that had a lot of problems, a lot of issues, narrow driveway, overgrown brush, no turnaround, those factors would have a red dot, so that would mean very low defensibility. So in the situation of a very fast-paced emergency, the firefighting crews could allocate resources to the homes that they could actually do something about.
We have topography here, and we have it hill shaded so that it is immediately, intuitively understandable. It's not a bunch of contour lines where you have to keep thinking, okay, V uphill, V uphill. We also have locations of structures with the address on it. Those two things really add a lot of value.
One thing we did learn was that this was unique in the state of Oregon. The state fire marshal stated that this level of support hadn't been provided by any county up to this point.
If thousands of people were to be evacuated, so would their animals. The Josephine Animal Control, in combination with a local pet business, Home Away from Home, cared for the small animals.
We had everything from dogs and cats, we had turkeys, we had chickens, we had snakes, we had turtles, we had lizards, we had, just anything that anybody wanted to call a pet that was in that area had to be evacuated, because the people basically were going to be evacuated and nobody take care of them, feed them. The local businesses, we had Fred Meyer, we had Walmart, we had different agencies donating food for the animals. Our state humane officer down, and he brought 2 or 3 guys and a bunch of carriers. Basically, just said that they were going to go home, and if we needed them, give them a call. But they were pleased, very excited that we were running the type of operation that we were. And there again, we were only doing that because of the volunteers we had. I had a couple of people that really pitched in.
Debbie, you remember those first days when they called us?
Yes.
We had
just to get ready to transport was their first call.
We had 80 dogs in here, and I don't know how many cats. And the next day it grew, and it grew, and it grew. And if animal control hadn't been helping us, I don't know what we would have done. Do you remember us stacking the cages? They started out in 1 level, and then they went to 3.
Double and triple, and then we moved outside.
And then, I don't know what you did with the big animals. What'd you do with those?
A lot of those people called and volunteered. Just said, we've got room for this, we've got room for that. So we moved the miniature pigs, who weren't miniatures, and horses and donkeys and llamas. And
the llamas were at my house.
Yeah,
yes,
a lot of people took them in. Good, yeah.
If I could have something I want 10 more Georges, the head of animal control, and 20 more Debbies.
When we received our evacuation notice, we did not have horse trailers lined up in here. We began picking up the telephone and scrambling to try to find another truck and another trailer of larger space. The highways were absolutely crazy with the number of people. They were bottle babies and we were bottle feeding them at the time that we had to evacuate, and so they came along with us. Had to be evacuated, and we boarded them at my sister-in-law's veterinarian clinic, Allen Creek Vet Hospital. They were nice enough to put them in one of their kennel runs.
These situations where we got kind of beat up. We really did, trying to get these animals into these trailers. A, they've never seen a trailer. B, getting into a trailer. And C, the smoke was getting thick and we had a little bit of a panic starting to go. These animals knew that something was up. The fire happened very quickly, but what was amazing was how quickly the volunteers of Josephine County got organized, communicated with each other, networked to expand, and follow through with what was needed to be done.
County airports played a vital role in battling the fire.
A major aerosol, and they tell me, hey, tomorrow morning we're going to need 5,000 gallons of fuel. Do you have it? I get to then scramble around for the next several hours trying to put that fuel together and have it in place for when they needed it 5 or 6 o'clock the next day. So there's a lot of behind the scene things that are going on when the food deliveries are made, when the equipment is being shipped in. They call me and say, hey, we've got a helicopter that needs a part. Where do we bring it?
Yeah, he's one of the helicopter crews that were working support for the fire, and the helicopters that were working on the fire during the Biscuit Fire. It was kind of a challenge to keep up with the needs during the time of the fire.
That airport lends itself well to forest firefighting operations because it was originally put into operation in 1943 as a smoke jumper base. So it's always been involved with firefighting. So it was very handy location to have. It would be nice to still have some kind of firefighting effort base there.
The Lake Salmac County Park was converted into a city for thousands of firefighters.
Tents, this is the normal way that people sleep at night inside tents. You have a couple thousand people in here from all over the United States as well as internationally. We have some crews from Australia and Canada here.
Hand crew boss for First Strike out of Roseburg, Oregon. And we're here fighting fires. We've been here for about 4 weeks now, and everything's going pretty good. We're heading back to, we got demobbed, and we're heading back to base and to get dispatched out to another fire.
I'm Jimmy Queen from Alaska, Mountain Village, Alaska, and I'm from the lower Yukon. I'm down here for fighting fire, and I just like it, I guess.
Everybody who works here in the fire camp and on this fire has to get paid. Every day they turn in their time that they work, and it goes to these good folks in here who have to do all the recording of that time so that that important paycheck comes later on. Let's go ahead. There's no real restriction on how much food anybody can eat here. You can we leave it up to each individual person on how much food they really need. We just want to make sure that they're getting all that they need.
People that are coming into the tent for treatment, we have drivers that are taking them to the local clinics, one being in Cave Junction and the other one in Grants Pass. The community has been extremely supportive towards this situation, going above and beyond in all ways. It's been really wonderful.
Despite the devastation and huge size of this fire, very few structures were lost and no lives were claimed.
When I went down to see what actually had happened, it was about 10 or 12 days after the fire had hit Oak Flat. And when I got as far as Betty McCaleb's, which is the low water bridge, the swinging bridge, I passed her turnoff, and when I came around that corner, it was just unbelievable.
Even the top 6 inches of duff had burned, and all of a sudden you saw the land form that you'd never seen because of all the trees and the brush and stuff. And I stopped the car and I got out, and I was just standing there, and I thought to myself, you know, 40 years of driving this road, and if I did not know where I was because I had just passed the turnoff, I would not know where I was.
Started helping us to cut brush. We'd been cutting brush and cleaning around the house for like 5 days straight. We had some wonderful friends from Selma, Bud and Judy Odom, that came out, and they were a godsend and helped us so much. And the caretakers, our family, the Mann family here, helped us an awful lot. We were like running on adrenaline because we've been cutting so much. The firefighters came and they had to set off an explosion back here behind to make a fire break, and then they set one off over on this side to make a fire break. That was real interesting because everything shook. Up here after the fire, I came up into this spot, looked up, and thought, oh, there's a pile of rocks there. I'd never seen it before. This just used to be so much brush you couldn't really tell how the lay of the land went. Didn't make a very big fire break back then in the summer.
During mop-up of the fire, work crews began to rehab the land.
This is the north side of Whiskey Creek drainage. This drainage is what we're looking at, approximately 1.5 miles from here, and it is a contingency line that was built to help control this fire. We have approximately 20 miles of those kind of lines that we're in the process now of rehabilitating. To make a clearing width of approximately 60 feet. And so these trees had to be cut so that we could achieve those objectives. But now what we have, after the fire's gone through, we need to do something to treat the soil so it does not erode either from wind or water. Correct. We have an objective here probably to cover at least 90% of the soil if we can do that.
It's not unlike some projects where they put nets and straw down to cover on the side of a road where there's a cut bank. What this does is the fiber in the trees and in the leaves and branches covers the soil so it doesn't get blown away.
There's a lot more to this rehab than probably most people realize.
Yes, it is. It gives you appreciation for initially putting in the lines, what will happen afterwards as far as the work that's required to put it back to bed.
As a result of this emergency, President George Bush came to Oregon to talk with leaders of the community. The Josephine County Board of Commissioners will continue their efforts to reduce the dangers of wildland fires.
We should be concentrating on thinning our timber sources. You can see from up there that nature has thinned some of them, and we don't want to let nature do everything. We have to help nature. We have to get that in there, and we have to harvest these trees. And also we should be harvesting some of the trees that have fallen and use that money that we'll get going back into timber harvesting.
If we would have had enough initial attack on the fires that we had this summer, we would have been able to avoid this very costly wildfire season that we had. And that means trying to get helicopters sited at our airports to be able to respond to fires either on private or public lands. In addition, we're going to continue our homeowner education and try to get as much information as assistance as we can to private landowners and homeowners in Josephine County so that they know how to prepare their properties and areas around their home.
We need to continue to work with our state and federal legislators on how we can reduce the fuel load, how we can minimize the impact on the environment, and come together as both timber and environmentalists and make this thing work for everybody.
I think one of the other things is you notice some of the footage, a lot of the trees have been cut and down and laying on the ground, and there was some discussion as far as some of the experts on keeping some of those trees on the ground to help for erosion and for future. But also many of those trees are merchantable and do need to be removed. And unfortunately with some of the legislation that we have today, it's almost impossible, or going to be almost impossible, to remove some of this what would be considered merchantable timber that is going to present a real fire hazard in the next couple of years to 5 years. So again, I hope you realize the magnitude of what we dealt with here in Josephine County.
We have to work together with our citizens and with all the agencies to be prepared. Josephine County is a beautiful place to live. It has a great quality of life, but fire is something we have to address each and every year.